Now, my children, sit close and let Auntie tell you a story. Not just about betrayal, but about awakening. You see, sometimes life doesn't bring you enemies from far away. No, sometimes the fire starts right inside your own kitchen, from the very hands you fed and trusted. It all began in a quiet home, the kind of home where laughter once danced in the hallways, where the smell of Sunday stew meant family and comfort. There was love there, or so I thought. The kind of love that feels safe, steady, and unshakable. But, my children, even the strongest house can tremble when the wind of truth blows too hard. It was an ordinary day when I first felt something shift. Nothing dramatic. Just a small silence where there used to be words, a long look that lingered too long. You know how a mother's heart can sense things before the mind does. I brushed it off at first. Told myself I was tired. Told myself I was imagining things. But deep down, something wasn't right. You see, the heart always whispers before it screams. And then, one evening, the whisper became a roar. A message found where it shouldn't have been. A name saved under another. A voice trembling where confidence used to live. I remember standing there, my hands cold, my chest tight, as truth unfolded right in front of me. My husband, the man I had built my world around, was entangled with the very woman who was supposed to become my son's wife. Can you imagine that kind of blow? It was as if the ground beneath me gave way. I stood in the wreckage of everything I believed, asking myself how love could turn into something so cruel. For days, I could hardly breathe. My mind replayed every moment, every smile, every touch, wondering how long I had been living in a lie. I wanted to rage. I wanted to scream until the heavens shook. But when you've lived long enough, you learn something important. Rage burns quick, but healing takes time. So I sat with my pain. I let it speak, and in the quiet, I heard a voice inside say, "You can't control what they did, but you can control what you become after it." That was the moment I decided my revenge wouldn't be loud. It wouldn't be bitter. No, my revenge would be peace. The kind of peace that can't be taken away. I stopped asking, "Why me?" and started asking, "What now?" I began to rebuild piece by piece. I focused on myself, on the woman who had given everything to others but forgotten how to pour into her own soul. I read, I prayed, I walked in the mornings and let the sunrise remind me that no night lasts forever. Slowly, I found strength in places I didn't know existed. Now, don't misunderstand me. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning to live without the weight of what hurt you. It means forgiving, not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. Studies say that people who practice forgiveness, real forgiveness, the kind that lets go of bitterness, recover faster, live longer, and laugh more freely. I didn't need science to tell me that. I could feel it in my bones. As time went on, the two who betrayed me began to reap the seeds they had sown. Lies don't hold forever. The same deceit that destroyed my trust began to unravel theirs. I didn't have to lift a finger. Life has a way of teaching lessons far better than revenge ever could. And when I saw them later, I didn't see anger in my reflection. I saw peace. That's when I knew I had won. I remember a friend once asked, "Aren't you angry?" I smiled and said, "My dear, anger is heavy." I decided to travel light. Because, you see, the sweetest revenge is not payback. It's power back. It's smiling when they expect you to crumble. It's walking with your head high when they thought you'd never stand again. So, my children, when life betrays you, and it will, in one way or another, don't let the bitterness take root. Let it teach you, shape you, refine you. Sometimes God lets the fire burn not to destroy you, but to burn away what no longer belongs in your life. And when the ashes settle, you'll see something beautiful. A stronger, wiser, freer version of yourself. So if you ever find yourself standing in the ruins of trust, don't despair. Rebuild. Rise. Let your peace be your revenge, your growth be your answer, and your joy be the song that silences every whisper of doubt. For in the end, it's not what was taken from you that defines you. It's what you choose to reclaim. They say the devil doesn't always come with horns. Sometimes, he comes wearing your husband's wedding band and your son's future bride's smile. That's a truth I learned the hard way. You know, people always talk about betrayal like it's a storm that comes out of nowhere. But no, my children, betrayal creeps in softly. It starts with whispers, with little silences, with eyes that don't quite meet yours anymore. It hides behind polite laughter and half-truths until one day, the mask slips, and what's underneath makes your soul tremble. That evening started like any other. I was tidying up the living room, humming to myself, folding a blanket that always seemed to fall off the couch. The house was quiet, peaceful even. Or at least that's what I told myself. But peace can be deceptive. Sometimes it's just the stillness before the quake. As I picked up my husband's phone from the coffee table, a message flashed across the screen. I wasn't the kind of woman to snoop. I believed in trust. But something in that moment, maybe it was God, maybe it was intuition, told me to look. And there it was, plain as daylight, words too soft, too intimate, written by a young woman I had welcomed into our family. My son's fiancée. My heart stopped. I remember reading that message again and again, hoping I was misunderstanding it. But no matter how many times I blinked, the letters didn't rearrange themselves. My breath grew heavy, my hands trembled, and for a moment, I thought I might collapse. You see, it's one thing to lose love. It's another thing entirely to lose respect. And that day, I lost both. I confronted the truth quietly at first. I watched them. The way their eyes met when they thought no one was looking, the way his tone softened when he spoke to her. Every sign became a wound, every smile between them a blade. I tried to deny it. I tried to pray it away. But truth doesn't need your permission to exist. It stands there, whether you face it or not. And when the truth finally stood naked before me, it was uglier than any nightmare. My husband, the man I had shared my dreams, my struggles, my laughter with, had betrayed not only me, but his own family. And that young woman, the one I had treated like a daughter, had betrayed the very man she was supposed to love. My dear, I can't describe the pain in words alone. It was as if someone had reached into my chest and squeezed the life right out of my heart. I wanted to scream, to break something, to run. But I didn't. I stood there in silence, because sometimes pain is too deep for sound. It settles like a weight inside you, heavy and cold. That night, I sat alone in my kitchen, staring at the flicker of the candle on the table. I kept asking myself, how could this happen? What did I do wrong? But over time, I came to understand, their choices were not a reflection of my worth. They were a reflection of their own emptiness. Some people drink from the well of love and still die of thirst because they've never learned gratitude. The next morning, when the sun rose, I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I simply got up and made breakfast like always, because sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is keep living when life tries to break you. I served their plates with steady hands, even though my heart was shattering inside. I looked at them, the man I once adored and the girl I had embraced as family, and I saw not power, but weakness. Betrayal doesn't destroy you, my children. It reveals you. It shows you who you are, and it shows them who they are not. I realized in that moment that my silence was louder than any rage could be. My calmness frightened them more than anger ever would. Later, when I finally confronted them, I didn't raise my voice. I simply said, I know. The look on their faces told me everything I needed to know. Shame, guilt, fear, it was all there. And as I stood there, something inside me shifted. I realized that I didn't need revenge, I needed release. Because when betrayal walks through your door, it doesn't knock. It just moves in. But you, my dear, you get to decide how long it stays. I decided that day that it would not live rent-free in my heart. Pain may visit, but peace is my permanent guest. And that's how I began my journey, not of revenge, but of reclaiming my power. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is smile, stand tall, and let the truth speak for itself. Now listen carefully, my darlings, because hurt can sneak up on a woman and make her forget who she is if she isn't careful. At first, when the truth hit me, I wanted revenge the way a child wants candy. All at once and with no thought for the consequences. I wanted to shout until my throat was raw. I wanted to bend every picture frame, tear every card, make them feel a fraction of the hollow weight that sat in my chest. I wanted the kind of spectacle that would make the whole neighborhood lean out of their windows and point. But then, in the quiet of my kitchen, with the kettle singing and the house holding its breath, I realized something important. Anger is easy, but it's also hungry. It eats at you long after the moment has passed. Fire will burn the ones who hurt you, yes, but it will also burn the hands that light it. True revenge, the kind that settles like honey on your skin, isn't about burning others down. It's about waking yourself up to your own worth. So I sat myself down. I let the tears come like rain on a tin roof. I cried for the woman I had been, the one who loved deeply and perhaps too freely, who put everyone else's hunger before her own. I cried for the dinners I prepared, the school runs, the quiet sacrifices that had become invisible. I cried not to make them feel guilty, but because the body needs to empty itself before it can be filled again. After the crying, I started to rebuild. Quietly, deliberately, like a woman repairing a favorite dress stitch by careful stitch. The first stitches were small, a walk before dawn when the air was cool and honest, a chapter of a book read aloud in the car, a phone call to an old friend that made me laugh until I forgot the ache. I planted a little pot of herbs on the windowsill, because watching something grow reminded me I could too. I learned to say no to favors that left me empty and yes to things that refilled me. These seemed like tiny acts, but they were the foundation of who I would become next. It helped to remember that healing is not a straight road. There were days I slipped, days I found myself replaying the message or staring at a chair that used to hold a hand I trusted. On those days I was honest with myself. I allowed the sorrow, I felt the betrayal, and then I nudged myself forward. I talked to a counselor, someone gentle who taught me that pain is not the enemy, but clinging to humiliation is. I joined a small group where women shared stories and soup, where a hand on my shoulder said louder than any sermon, "You are not alone." Sometimes strength shows up not as a roar but as small, steady acts. I taught myself new rhythms: a Sunday morning to be quiet with my thoughts, an afternoon once a week just for a hobby that had nothing to do with anyone else's needs. I found old photographs and smiled at the younger woman who once had dreams spilling out of her like light. I wrote letters I never sent. Long, honest pages that let me sort through the tangle of why, until fewer knots remained. And slowly, the loudness I thought I needed faded. What replaced it was not emptiness but a deep, steady peace. People will tell you that revenge is about making someone pay. Auntie says, nope, the best revenge is your life becoming so full that there is no corner left for bitterness. When I started to own my time and my choices, when I cooked for myself with joy instead of duty, when I laughed with friends and stayed up late talking about books and grandchildren, that was when I felt my power returning. It was quiet, yes, but it was real. One dear sister in our neighborhood once told me, I thought I'd spend my life marked by that hurt. She planted tomatoes the following spring and discovered she could nurture something red and warm and sweet. That was her revenge, the bright round fruit dangling from a vine she had grown with her own hands. We will find our own tomatoes, my children. Whatever small, stubborn joy proves to us that we are still capable of beauty. Sometimes the greatest act of strength is walking away with your dignity intact when everyone expects you to crumble. Dignity isn't loud. It's the calm in your step, the steady line of your back, the unhurried way you answer questions you don't owe people. Choosing dignity taught me boundaries. Choosing peace taught me patience. Choosing myself taught me how to live again. So when the storm inside threatens to uproot you, do not race to thunder. Let the rain fall, let the wind speak, and then begin, slowly, to plant. They say karma takes her time, but she never forgets an address. You might not see her coming, but she always finds her way. Sometimes slow, sometimes quiet, but always sure. And when she does, she doesn't knock. She just walks in, sits down, and starts serving the lessons hot. Not long after the storm in my life had settled, I began to hear things. Not from gossip. Oh no, Auntie doesn't listen to that. But from the little whispers that find their way through the grapevine. The same young woman who once thought she had stolen something precious realized she had only picked up a burden. The man she thought was her secret treasure turned out to be a mirror, reflecting back every bit of her own selfishness, her greed, her hunger for attention. You see, my children, people who build happiness on someone else's tears will always end up drowning in their own sorrow. At first, I didn't feel joy hearing it. Truthfully, I felt nothing. There was a time I thought seeing them suffer would make me feel better, that watching karma work would taste sweet. But by the time it came around, my spirit had outgrown bitterness. Still, I couldn't help but notice how life has a way of rearranging things. What they had built on lies started crumbling, piece by piece. The laughter they once shared turned into arguments, the promises into excuses. Because deceit, my darlings, is like termites. It eats from the inside out. You don't see the damage right away, but when it all collapses, it's too late to rebuild. I heard she cried the same tears I once cried, that she began to wonder who else he might be whispering to in the dark. I almost pitied her. Almost. But then I remembered. Pity is a luxury you can't afford for people who chose to hurt you. I simply said a quiet prayer for both of them, not because they deserved it, but because peace is a garden you must keep watering, even when others tried to burn it down. And me? Oh, I flourished. I took all that time they thought they had stolen from me and invested it in myself. I started going on morning walks, greeting the sun like an old friend. I laughed louder, loved deeper. Not for someone else's approval this time, but for my own joy. I poured my energy into my work, into things that made me proud. I found beauty in simple moments. A quiet cup of tea, a clean house, a phone call from my children. You'd be surprised how peaceful life becomes when drama no longer lives at your doorstep. There's a kind of glow that only comes from surviving what was meant to break you. That glow became my crown. People would look at me and say, "You look different. What's your secret?" I'd smile and say, "Peace looks good on me." And it was true. The bitterness had left my skin, the sadness had left my eyes. What was left was wisdom, soft, steady, and unshakable. I remember one day, months later, running into him at the store. Oh, he looked tired. That kind of tired that sits in your bones, not just your face. Life had caught up with him. I greeted him politely. Nothing more, nothing less. The same hands that once betrayed me now fumbled to hold a shopping bag steady. I walked away with my head high and a quiet smile on my lips. I didn't need an apology. His eyes had already said it for him. You see, my children, the reckoning doesn't always come in thunder and lightning. Sometimes it comes in silence, in the empty bed where love once slept, in the mirror that reflects regret. That's the beauty of truth. It doesn't need revenge to prove itself. It just waits. And when the time comes, it shines so bright that lies can't survive its light. I learned then that what people do to you says nothing about your worth and everything about their character. When you stop chasing closure and start chasing peace, the universe rearranges itself in your favor. Doors open, blessings flow, and joy finds you again. Not because they changed, but because you did. So I kept moving forward. I started volunteering, mentoring younger women who were walking through their own storms. I told them, "Baby, don't waste your years waiting for them to suffer. You just live so well that their memory fades into a footnote." Some of them cried. Some of them smiled. But all of them understood that real victory isn't in payback. It's in peace. And that's how I found freedom. Not by fighting. Not by proving. But by simply living. Beautifully, gracefully, and without apology. The same fire that once burned me became the light that guided my way. Because when karma comes, she doesn't need your help. All you need to do is step aside and let her do her work. Now hear me well, my children. This isn't just a story about betrayal. No, this is a story about boundaries, about healing, and about being reborn when life thinks it's buried you for good. You see, pain doesn't come to destroy you, it comes to teach you something. And if you listen closely, you'll realize that sometimes your greatest heartbreak carries your greatest lesson inside it. Every woman, every man, will face that moment. The one where life snatches the rug from beneath your feet and leaves you gasping, wondering how to stand again. Maybe it's a friend who turned out to be an enemy. Maybe it's a lover who forgot their promises. Or maybe it's life itself saying, it's time to grow. But hear me, what defines you isn't what happens. It's how you rise after the fall. When my world fell apart, I used to think I would never smile again. I thought forgiveness meant pretending it didn't happen, or letting them walk away without consequences. I used to think that if I forgave, it meant they had won. But oh, how wrong I was. Forgiveness, I learned, isn't a gift you give to them. It's a gift you give yourself. The key that unlocks the door to your own peace. Studies say that emotional betrayal ranks among the top 3 most traumatic experiences a person can endure right after the death of a loved one. That kind of pain doesn't just sting, it rewires your soul. But here's the beautiful twist: those who choose forgiveness, real forgiveness, the kind that lets go of anger and shame, heals 60% faster. They sleep better, breathe easier, and smile more freely. And not because they forgot, but because they stopped letting the wound define them. When I first heard that, I laughed. I said, how could I possibly forgive people who broke my heart like that? But life has a way of showing you that holding on to bitterness is like drinking poison and waiting for someone else to die. The longer I held on, the heavier I became. I carried their sins on my shoulders while they walked free, and one day, I realized, I was the one still trapped in the story they wrote. So I started the slow work of forgiveness. Not the pretty kind, not the quick, churchy kind. The real kind. The kind where you cry in your kitchen at midnight, whispering to yourself, I release this. I deserve peace. It took time. Some days I meant it, some days I didn't, but each time I said those words, I felt the chains loosen just a little more. And then came the boundaries. Oh, my children, boundaries are love wrapped in self-respect. When you've been betrayed, it's easy to think you must harden your heart to protect yourself. But you don't need to build walls, you need to build gates. Gates that let peace in and keep poison out. I learned to say no without guilt, to stop explaining myself to people who were committed to misunderstanding me. I learned that being kind doesn't mean being a fool, and that forgiveness doesn't mean reunion. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is love someone from far away. One day, I ran into an old friend who had watched my storm from the sidelines. She said, "You look lighter." What changed? And I told her, I stopped carrying what wasn't mine. Because that's the truth. Betrayal may start with them, but healing starts with you. You see, forgiveness doesn't erase the past, it reclaims your power over it. It says, you may have hurt me, but you cannot define me. It turns your pain into wisdom, your scars into strength. And oh, my dear, once you reach that place, there's a glow that settles on you. The kind no makeup can give and no heartbreak can steal. Sometimes I look back on it all and smile, not because it didn't hurt, but because it taught me who I am. I learned that I can survive the things I thought would end me. I learned that my worth doesn't depend on anyone's loyalty. And I learned that peace is not found in revenge, but in release. So if you ever find yourself standing in the middle of broken promises, remember this: forgiveness doesn't mean they win. It means you do. It means you've chosen to step out of the prison they built and walk toward the sunlight. It means you've remembered who you are, strong, capable, and deserving of joy that no one can take away. And that, my children, is the lesson life whispered to me when I thought I had lost everything. You can't control what people do, but you can always choose how you rise. And sometimes, the sweetest victory of all is walking away lighter, freer, and full of peace, glowing from the inside out. When I finally looked at myself in the mirror, I didn't see the woman who'd been left behind or the woman who'd been betrayed. I saw someone new staring back at me, a woman baptized by fire and reborn through her own tears. The eyes looking back weren't the same. There was strength there now, quiet and deep, the kind that doesn't shout, but simply stands, firm, unshakable. I realized I wasn't a broken woman anymore. I was a warrior, baptized by betrayal and anointed by survival. It's funny how pain, the very thing that almost destroys you, can become the very thing that shapes you into someone stronger. When you lose everything you thought made you whole, you're left with yourself. And that's where the rebuilding begins. I started small. I picked up a hobby I had long forgotten: painting. My hands were shaky at first, but with every brushstroke, I felt the colors of my own spirit returning. I traveled too, not to run away, but to remind myself how big the world still was. To see that life didn't end just because love did. One afternoon, I took a trip alone to the coast. I remember standing barefoot in the sand, letting the water rush over my feet. The sea didn't care about my story, my scars, or my tears. It just kept moving, steady, endless. And in that rhythm, I found something sacred. I realized that healing doesn't mean forgetting what happened, it means flowing forward in spite of it. Like the tide, I could rise again and again. Slowly, joy began to return to my life. Not the loud, crowded kind, but the gentle kind that hums quietly in your chest. I laughed again. Oh, it felt strange at first to hear that sound coming out of me. But one evening, I was sitting on my porch watching the sunset, and I started laughing for no reason at all. Maybe it was the peace that had finally found me, or maybe it was God whispering, "You made it." Either way, it was the sweetest sound I'd heard in years. I rebuilt friendships too. Not the kind built on gossip or obligation, but the kind that hold your hand and remind you who you are. People who loved me not for what I could give, but simply because they wanted to see me whole. Sometimes, you have to lose people to realize who truly belongs. The ones who stayed, they became part of my healing. We shared meals, memories, and laughter until the shadows that betrayal left began to fade. There's a sister from my church I'll never forget. One day, after service, she came up to me with tears in her eyes. "Auntie Mae," she said, "I thought my heartbreak would end me, but now I see. It was just clearing space for the woman I was always meant to be." I held her hand and smiled, because I knew exactly what she meant. Sometimes, God allows your house to catch fire. Not to destroy you, but to burn away what no longer belongs. You don't see it in the flames. You see it afterward when the smoke clears, and you realize you've been freed from things that were never meant for you. And that's what transformation really is. Freedom. Not just from others, but from the version of yourself that settled, that silenced her truth just to keep the peace. I learned that loving myself wasn't selfish. It was survival. I learned that my heart could break and still beat beautifully. I learned that the world didn't end just because one chapter did. It simply turned the page. One day, I looked around and realized I was no longer surviving, I was living. I had built a new rhythm for my life. I cooked for myself because I wanted to, not because I had to feed someone else. I danced in my kitchen to old songs. I wore bright colors again, lipstick too. I learned to love my solitude, not fear it. And let me tell you something. Peace looks good on a woman. It shines from her skin, walks in her step, and sings in her laughter. When I think back on everything now, I don't feel anger. I feel gratitude, because that storm that once tore my world apart gave me back to myself. I would not trade this version of me for anything. This woman knows her worth. She sets her boundaries. She knows that losing people isn't always a loss. Sometimes it's protection. And so, my children, if you ever find yourself in the ashes of something that once felt like home, don't despair. Pick yourself up. Dust off the suit, look in the mirror and say, "I'm still here." Because you are. You are proof that fire doesn't just destroy, it refines. And when the flames die down, what remains is pure gold, strong, shining, and ready to begin again. So when you think of revenge, my children, remember this. It's not about hurting back. No, true revenge is not found in chaos or bitterness. It's found in peace, in power, in rising so high that those who once tried to bury you have to lift their eyes just to see your light. That is the kind of revenge that heals you instead of hardening you. For a long time, I thought revenge meant showing them, proving to the world that I was right and they were wrong. I used to picture walking past them with my head high, looking perfect, smelling of success, the kind of moment you dream about when your heart is still bleeding. But you see, revenge that comes from anger burns too fast. It may feel good for a moment, but it leaves you empty after the fire dies down. The real revenge, the kind that lasts, comes when you choose peace over pride. When you stop fighting battles that are beneath you. When you stop explaining yourself to people who never tried to understand you. There's a power in silence, a grace in moving on, and a quiet strength in simply living well. If they lied, let truth be your revenge. Truth doesn't need to be shouted. It stands tall on its own, like a mountain unmoved by the wind. You don't have to convince anyone of who you are. Your actions, your growth, and your peace will speak louder than any rumor. People may twist your story for a while, but in time, the truth always untangles itself. And when it does, those who doubted you will remember your grace, not your anger. If they betrayed you, let peace be your revenge. Because nothing unsettles a guilty conscience more than your calm. While they expect you to break, you breathe. While they watch for your tears, you smile. And while they whisper, you stay silent. Not because you are weak, but because you refuse to play small anymore. Peace is a weapon they can't touch. It disarms, it confuses, it transforms. And if they tried to make you small, let your growth be your revenge. Don't shrink to fit anyone's comfort. Expand. Stretch. Become everything they said you couldn't be. Go places they never thought you'd reach. Live a life so full that their memory becomes a shadow in your sunlight. The best payback, my children, is happiness so loud that it drowns out the noise of the past. I remember once, after everything that happened, someone asked me if I ever wanted to get even. I smiled and said, "No, baby. I don't get even. I get better." Because that's what growth is. It's turning every scar into a story of survival. It's laughing again when you thought you never would. It's standing taller, not because the world is kind, but because you've learned how to hold your own head high. Sometimes, people will try to dim your light because it reminds them of their darkness. Let them. You just keep shining. You don't owe anyone your anger. You owe yourself your freedom. And freedom, my dear ones, is the kind of revenge that no one can take from you. I saw my betrayers again one day. They looked surprised, maybe even a little uncomfortable. They expected the broken woman they left behind, but instead, they saw someone whole, someone radiant. I didn't need to say a word. My peace spoke for me. That's when I knew. Revenge wasn't in the past I survived, but in the life I built after. You see, when you focus on healing, you shift the power back to yourself. You stop living in reaction to pain and start living in response to purpose. You stop asking, "Why me?" and start saying, "Thank you for teaching me what I deserve." That's the moment you win, quietly, completely, beautifully. So, if they lied on you, let your truth shine without explanation. If they betrayed your trust, build a life so peaceful that they can't stand the sound of your laughter. If they tried to make you small, grow until their memory looks tiny beside your blessings. Because at the end of the day, the sweetest vengeance is not payback. It's power back. And oh, how sweet it is to wake up one day and realize you've become the person you were always meant to be. Whole, unbothered, and glowing from within. The fire that once tried to burn you only forged your strength. And now, every step you take is your victory, every smile is your triumph. So go on, my children. Don't waste your precious energy trying to settle old scores. Let your peace, your purpose, and your joy do the talking. Because when you rise with grace, even your silence becomes your revenge. And that is the wisdom of a woman who learned to turn her pain into power and her heartbreak into a hallelujah.